What is up? Thank God iPod is live. I'm your host, Chaz Pippitt. I'm the founder of Baseball Rebellion and Softball Rebellion, and I talk about baseball, softball, and anything related to training those sports from current events, hitting, pitching, game approach, throwing, arm care, weight training, you name it, we cover it here at Thank God iPod. Tonight, TGIP has an awesome show for you. We're going to be joined by Jordan Foster of Pinkman Academy in Herndon High School softball. She's been an instructor to both boys and girls on hitting and fielding for many years and is now the head coach at Herndon High School. But before we hear from Jordan, I wanted to talk about the controversy about the pitch calling watches that Vanderbilt and NC State and other schools were both using this week in their games. What blows my mind is the audacity of some of the people on Twitter to question Vanderbilt, the best college baseball program in the country, and Tim Corbin's decision to use this type of pitch calling situation. It's better than the 15 million things that coaches do from the dugout. It's better than the armband. It's faster. It's instant. It really improves pace of play, and it takes some of the unnecessary thinking out of the game for some of the athletes. I absolutely loved it when I saw NC State use it when they destroyed Longwood yesterday or the day before. It was fascinating to me to see some of these people on Twitter go at some of the top college baseball programs and top college coaches in the country for making this decision. And I was thinking to myself, why in the world do people like the Wizard, Wizardville 23, think that it's a funny thing or a good thing to come at Tim Corbin or Vanderbilt? Like, yeah, they absolutely did go 1-2 on the weekend. They did. And it wasn't because of the watch, you moron. It was because they got beat. It happens. These are college kids. Baseball teams lose. The best teams in the world go 162. That's a lot of losses, and they're the best teams in the big leagues. So what blows my mind is how these same people who would crawl through the same vile terribleness that Andy Dufresne from the Shawshank Redemption crawled through to get out of jail just to be around Tim Corbin, feel comfortable enough on social media to go after certain people. And that's what we see all the time. I mean, Mike Tyson said, and I'll paraphrase, he said, people have gotten way too comfortable on social media talking junk because if they did that in person, they'd get knocked out. And that's the thing. There's so many people with so many opinions. And we have to be able to filter those opinions and rise above those opinions. So instead of Wizardville 23, give them a follow if you want to see ridiculous opinions on baseball. Instead of listening to guys like that, right, and saying, well, the watches obviously didn't help where they would have won 2 games instead of lost 2 games or swept a series, maybe think about how these types of technologies can advance the game. How can they be a teachable moment for these players in real time? Maybe the pitcher thinks he needs to throw a curveball, but he gets called fastball in. And at the end of the inning, he goes back to the dugout and he says, Coach, why'd you call fastball in on that 2-2 count with 1 runner on and 2 outs? And then the coach can tell him right then. And some of them have earpieces too for the catcher, right? So Tom Brady has people call plays for him. Why is this a problem? Sure, he can audible and the pitcher can wipe. The pitcher can change the shake and whatever. But the suggestion and the general guidance of the coach is, I think, something that's extremely needed, really smart, and something that happens at the highest level of all sports all the time. If you watch an NBA game, the coach is calling plays, the coach is calling inbound plays. If you watch the NFL, every single play is called from the sideline. You can see the guys holding their ears so they can hear the call. There's so much opportunity for baseball to grow, and softball too, to grow, speed up the game even faster, and get the players thinking in the same way the coach does, instead of being so worried about how many times did a coach touch his nose, is the indicator on, and trying to decode all these ridiculous signs. Don't you guys remember we just got out of the biggest sign stealing scandal in the history of baseball? Like literally, people were suspended for over a year. People lost their jobs. They're blacklisted from the game for stealing signs. Let's eliminate it. Let's get it out of the game. Let's have the pitchers decide what they need with the information from their coaches and catchers, and work together to have a faster game, a smarter game, and a better game. And I think that's obviously what everybody in baseball and softball is looking for: fast-paced games. Nobody wants to watch a 4-hour baseball game. I know I don't, and I know the playoffs are different, and I'll put up with it then. But in general, we need to get through these things, speed them up, more action, less thinking on the field. Let's think between innings, get on the same page, and then that pitch calling becomes even faster. The opening rant tonight was brought to you by HitTrax. HitTrax is the #1 indoor ball tracking technology anywhere. We have 5 HitTrax machines here at Baseball Rebellion and Softball Rebellion, and every single ball hit is tracked. We want to make sure that we prove improvement, and nothing is more reliable and easier to use than the HitTrax machine for indoor ball tracking. I highly recommend it. And when we move to our new facility, we're probably going to be picking up a 6th HitTrax machine, just because we want to make sure that we can continue to bring the best information, the best measurement, and the best technology to every single person here at Baseball Rebellion and Softball Rebellion. So now I'm going to bring in Jordan. Jordan, again, was a high school coach, or is the high school coach at Herndon High School, and she is a softball and baseball instructor at Pinkman Academy. Jordan, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. We actually haven't spoken before right now.
I know.
So I'm excited to actually meet you. I've been following you on Twitter for a while. I really enjoy your content. So welcome to Thank God I Pod.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I know. It's great to meet my Twitter BFF in person, or as much in person as we can be now. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. So talk to me about how you balance the time of being a high school coach and then trying to give lessons as well. Obviously, practice time and lesson time are overlapping. Talk about how you do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. So we just started the season. This week was tryouts and roster assignments and everything. So I mean, you literally are catching me after what was supposed to be our first practice and ended up being an indoor night tonight. And discussing some team details. So it definitely is difficult. We practice fairly early. I've definitely had to compress hours for lessons, but it's the families that come into the academy don't stop coming in during the season. They come in for the most part. They want to get better. The kids have a regular cadence. And so I try not to mess with that. I really try to be consistent. I didn't always have consistent coaching as a kid, particularly from female coaches. They kind of came and went. And so I think it's important for kids to have consistent instruction. Now, that said, we do have instructors at the academy, at Pinkman Academy, where I conduct lessons. We all coach the same general style. We just have different ways of saying it. And so we do share kids. And that's one of the things that I really like about being there is we share the kids from time to time, and everybody knows everybody's kids. And so we get to celebrate their achievements, and they get to hear different voices, which I think is important.
Well, I think it's really cool. You mentioned something right there I think is really smart. Your players continue to come to lessons during the season, right? So what I try to equate that to is if you're about to go into exams, you don't stop studying for exams. You keep studying when exams happen, right? So the tests are kind of like the exams. And in real time, instructors can help so many things if you continue coming to instruction and you communicate with your instructors about exactly what's going on. Now, what's really unique is you're a high school coach too. So I would imagine some of your players may not even come to you for instruction. They might come to somebody else. So how does that work out? How do you juggle both hats of being, I'm a coach, I need to win, I need to play my best 9 girls, and I'm also a private instructor. I understand the process of learning, and that player X may not be quite ready to get where I want her to be, but she's on that pathway. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the team that I have right now, the high school team that I have right now, is it's a very interesting situation. So most of the kids, so I coach at Herndon High School. There's also South Lakes High School. They neighbor one another. Reston and Herndon in our area neighbor one another. And so I actually went to South Lakes High School and coached there previously, and now coach at Herndon. And so the kids who are on this team right now are kids that I have actually coached for the majority of the past 11 years. So in some form or another through the local league, Herndon Reston Youth Softball. We've done pitching clinics together. I've coached some of their house league teams, a lot of their travel teams. So it's a really special moment in my personal history with the game, because I get to see these kids from 7 to 17 and kind of see them come full circle. Now, that said, some of them do come to me for lessons in hitting or pitching, and some of them don't, and some don't take private instruction, and some go to other people. Softball and baseball are similar, and you can ask 5 different people about pitching philosophy and get 5 different answers, so I don't claim to have the one answer that's going to be right for everyone. I've done a lot. I try to be a student of the game and understand enough about each of the different styles that may be different from my own, to make sure that I'm not derailing a kid, because my job isn't to come in and change all of what these kids are doing, especially if they've been successful. There's absolutely no reason I need to come in and change that. That would be my ego and my need. And really what we need to be focused on is what's going to make this kid the best that they can be. So, the kids that I see are the kids for whom I have the most context into their process, into how much work they're putting in, into what, how they practice, and the type of head they have for the game. But that doesn't mean that they're the only kids that are qualified to pitch or to be in the lineup, right? So I think I try to maintain. I try to be approachable enough for the kids on any of my teams to come up and talk and have a dialogue. I will always be honest with the kids about where I think they are. I don't really believe in putting together teams where I won't be playing kids. I try to keep us lean enough that we can play everybody to some degree, but deep enough that we've got range. So I just try to keep an open dialogue and communication and say, hey, here's where I see you. There's opportunity to develop. And if you want to develop and maybe have more pitching time, here's what you got to do. Or you want to move up in the lineup, here's what you got to do for that. And just be frank with them and give them the insight into the coaching process, because that teaches them about the game.
Well, honesty is always the best policy, right? So if you're honest about your goals, right? My goal as high school softball coach is to win games, right? Develop you, let you have a good overall experience, but I'm going to play the best 9. Yep. My toughest question for you, probably the toughest question I've ever asked anybody, is as a high school coach that also gives lessons, right? You can seem, and I'm not saying you, I'm saying big you. If you do those 2 things, you can seem very salesy, like, hey, come to lessons and I'll get you in a lineup. We'll work on this, that, and the other. How do you balance that? Because I know for me, I specifically don't coach teams because of that possible inferred conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying you do that. What I'm asking is, how in the world do you balance that and that perception of, Lexi comes to lessons with Jordan, so Lexi hits third, with the chirping that can happen. I'm not saying that happens, but how do you balance that and how do you overcome that?
Yeah, it's a legitimate question. It's a conversation that I had with our athletic director before even applying for this role, quite frankly.
Sure.
I wasn't actually going to apply for this. The way that this happened was that the girls approached me about it. The role came available, and the team got together, or parts of the team got together and approached me about it. And so, that to me shows me a program of kids that wants to own their program. And I like that. I like seeing that in kids. So I said, okay, I'll have that conversation with the athletic office. And that was something I asked. This is a vocation for me. So is this a conflict of interest? Number one, am I breaking any rules here by conducting lessons potentially with these kids? And the answer was no. So from that perspective, it's above board and legitimate. The other part of it is that now that we're in season, the kids see me 5 and 6 days a week. They see me 5 and 6 days a week. We're doing, pitching and hitting or where I instruct primarily. So we're doing all that in practice. And so the lessons do kind of dial back in season, at least for the kids that I work with on the team, just because we see each other all the time.
Sure.
Right? So there's not a ton of opportunity for them to rest outside of the high school season. So the problem, or the perceived problem, solves itself. And honestly, as long as I am above board with what the Virginia High School League and the county are telling me that I need to be doing, it is not my business what folks are going to say about it. And ultimately, I want these kids to get better. If they want to come in and spend the time, absolutely. But I'm also going to encourage them to take their rest days when they have their rest days, because it doesn't get easier. If they want to pursue the sport longer term, it's not going to get easier. They should take it when they can.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, every year we have, multiple kids go play college, whether it's baseball or softball, and we try to prepare them for you're really going to have 6 a.m. or earlier lifts. And if somebody gets in trouble, you're really going to have 5 a.m. lifts. And you have to actually go to class and study hall and practice and sign in at meals, depending on the level you play at. We try to prepare people for that. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that we do as instructors at Baseball Rebellion, I'm sure you do at Pinkman as well, is you try to prepare people for that next level. So when you've got a young kid or a young girl who's maybe in Herndon's district, right? They're coming to you for softball instruction at this point. How do you, if you have a girl who's maybe not as talented, maybe not as developed yet, maybe not as big as some of the girls you have now, and they're like, yeah, I'm so excited to play for you next year, and they're in 8th grade, how do you kind of give them that real answer of well, we've got some work to do, and just from coming to lessons doesn't necessarily mean you're going to play varsity as a freshman? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely not a pay to play team. It just isn't. And
Sure.
and
It can't be. Your job's to win. You got to play the best girls.
We got to play, and it can be very tough. I'll tell you, Chaz, right now I have 10 pitchers on between my teams. I mean, I have 10 pitchers, 10, and not just 10 pitchers, but 10 solid pitchers. And so this is the first time, certainly for our school, that we've had that. We've struggled with numbers in the past, and we're solidly with 2 teams now. But I mean, we've got 10 pitchers. We have 8 returning seniors on this current varsity team. We had 12 returning players on this current varsity team. So it is a tough lineup to break into, right?
Right.
And we took a couple from this recent tryout, but I mean, it is a tough lineup to break into, and that is not easy for some people to understand. It has very little to, I mean, in this particular situation, it has very little to do with the kids, and in terms of their ability to proceed, I guess, or to excel at certain levels, or their just overall athletic abilities, and more we've just got we've got a ton of returning players, and it's year to year. I'm sorry, you're getting my dog. This is the COVID world we live in, but
that's all right.
But anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to break into lineups, and you know what? It's tough to break into lineups in college too. Not every kid wants to go forward and play college ball, and that's fine. But ultimately, we've just got to juggle. And that's the toughest thing about coaching, because every single one of the kids that I work with, and especially all these kids that I've known forever, on the current team, that can be a hard conversation to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, again, I just try to be as honest and authentic as I can with the kids, and say, hey, here's what we're going to face, or here's where I need you right now. Here's where the team needs you right now. Right. Is that going to work? And if it's not going to work, I've had kids be honest with me about that too, and that's okay. That's their path. But I've got to look out for the school.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just started teams at Baseball Rebellion. So we have 5 Baseball Rebellion teams. I've been saying no to teams for over a decade now, and the reality is we needed teams. And so I'm not involved in them at all. But I remember asking Eric and Tyler, who really pushed me for this. I was like, what are we going to do when Dad X says, I've been taking lessons for 4 years here. Why didn't my kid make the team? Or why isn't my kid playing shortstop? I was like, I don't want to deal with those questions. I was like, the first time I deal with it is going to be the last time I deal with it. So how are you guys going to deal with that? And what are we going to do to make sure that we're not, that we don't have that perception of like, well, they're not very good. They just take the guys that come to lessons, because that's the last thing I want to do. I want to take the best kids. I want to win. And I want to teach these kids how to compete. And I think that that's really underrated right now with, all the things that we tell kids. It's okay to feel this way. It's okay to feel that way. And emotions are important things to recognize. But at the same time, we got to teach some toughness. We've got to teach people how to push through things that are difficult. And I've got two little boys. I got an 8-year-old. I got a 5-year-old. My 5-year-old, I always joke around that he's going to be an MMA fighter because he's crazy. But he was going to his first Taekwondo test, right? And he was a little bit worried about breaking the boards. And I said, well, buddy, I mean, this is the path you've chosen. Like, you got to get through it. And he went out there and he did it. And he felt so good about himself. So he had to deal with that anxiety. He had to overcome it. I said, it's okay to feel a certain way, but you have to understand that and then move forward through it. How do you think we're doing as a coaching profession, of whether it's instruction or high school, of preparing young female and young male athletes to deal with the adversity without wanting to give up and being told that giving up is okay? Because I see that a lot right now.
Yeah, I mean, you just hit on such an important topic. And I can give you 100 examples of very similar things where, I talk to the kids and say, don't quit 5 minutes before the miracle. And we push through stuff. And whether it's boys or girls, I just had an 8-year-old boy I was working with a couple of weeks ago, and he's really nervous. He's got tryouts coming up. And he's been working really hard over the winter, but now it's starting to get real. And every time the actual baseball would come out, instead of like a light flight or something, then all of a sudden, he'd shut down. But it's a kid who will talk to me if I take the time. And so we sat down and I said, hey, let's go through this. And he explained finally how he was feeling. And we talked through it, and it's not about the result, right? The result, you got to fall in love with the process. And if we can teach kids that from 8 years old or even 5 years old, fall in love with the process, and the results that are meant to happen are going to happen, because regardless of whether or not he makes the team that he's trying out for, like, his improvement is significant over the winter, right? Like, the work that he has put in, he's been in pitching with Jeff, he's been in hitting with me. The work that he has put in has tenfold improved both his throw and his swing. So that doesn't go away. That doesn't make that not count. I'm definitely not the coach that's going to say, hey, you're going to make the team, right? You're going to make the team. There's no chance that you won't. I don't tell kids things that I can't verify.
Sure.
But what I can say is that if you make the team, you earned it. And if you don't make the team, it doesn't negate everything that you just did. So we say, don't, and we talked through that, and then he goes in and sets a record on hit tracks for himself. And it's like, hey, if you had quit, if you had walked away and decided to end the lesson when you wanted to, we would never have gotten there, because you would have opted yourself out, right? But you didn't. You pushed through that feeling, because feelings are, I always say it, feelings aren't always facts, and they're not, and then they're finite, right? They don't last. And so it can feel, especially when you're 8 and you haven't been on the planet that long, it can feel that you're going to feel this way forever. If I keep playing baseball, this is how I'm going to feel. I'm going to feel panic.
Right.
I'm going to feel, I'm going to feel less than. But if I can push through that and just sit it out for a second, or sit with it for a second and work through it, then I can move forward. And so I think the thing that we need to teach kids, and I don't know that we always do a good job of, is emotions are valid, but it's not always the best thing to make a decision based on, right? Like, we don't want to necessarily make a decision based in emotion. We want to feel the emotion. We want to observe it, see what it's trying to tell us. Then once we're kind of clear-headed, that's what I try to work with the kids on. Like, identify when we're emotional, identify when we're rational, and try to make decisions when we're rational. So hopefully that kind of covers it. It's that's an area that I'm really passionate about with the kids because I find that it makes them better competitors.
Feelings are such a fascinating thing, right? So
Mhm.
there's two questions I want to ask you. One, how do you feel about the fact that 8-year-olds are getting cut from teams? One, that's a little odd. And then two, um, with feelings, kids will say, not necessarily feelings like I'm sad, I'm happy, but feels of baseball and softball. So, like, man, I feel like I'm right on that. Well, yeah, you've missed 4 in a row. You're obviously not
Or
right
that we're
on that. So, like,
yeah,
your
right.
feel is terrible. Like, what do you want me to tell you? I'll edit this. I was working with a kid, or he was working with somebody else, and he was just complaining. A high school kid, way too old to be acting the way he
Mhm.
was. And I'm not going to say his name, but I was like, "Hey, do you feel like you're under that ball?" He goes, "No, I feel like I'm right on it." I was like, "Well, your feel sucks,"
Yeah.
you know. And that was aggressive, but it like woke him up. He was like, "Oh yeah, I guess my feel is wrong." Like, yeah, man, the ball's telling you, like, you're missing it. Do something different. So, how do you feel about the 8-year-old having to try out for a team? And what does that say about the state of whatever baseball or softball he or she is trying to go for? And what does that say about the parents that are putting them in this situation?
Yeah, well, and this particular situation was more of like an evaluation and it was going to shuffle around, but it felt like a tryout. It felt to him,
Sure.
it's the biggest thing he's ever done, right? To him,
Yeah.
it was a big deal for him to go out and put skill, showcase everything and get placed.
Gotcha. So
And
it's like a little league evaluation. I misunderstood.
yeah, but I mean, there's travel. I mean, there's travel at that age group, and that's definitely something that I see that is different between the boys and the girls. It's not that it doesn't exist in softball leagues, but it is, at least in our area, less prevalent to have that type of a travel,
Of
selection
like make or
process.
you don't play. I got it.
Right. It's less common to have that on the girls' side. On the boys' side, it definitely happens. I do think it can get a little intense a little early, um, because as kids are learning who they are, and we continue to learn that. Let's be frank. I mean, we continue to learn that as long as we're around. I'm still figuring out who I am, right? But as kids develop that sense of self, they're trying to figure out what's appropriate for them and how to set different boundaries. And to your point, we need to listen to that. We need to listen to that, but we also need to understand when there's a quote unquote boundary that a kid is setting that's based in fear versus when it's based in deep self-knowledge. And most 8-year-olds don't have that deep self-knowledge yet, right? It's We develop that by trying things and failing at things. Now, that said, how am I going to then place an 8-year-old out of a team, and not even give him the chance to try and figure out, and see what's up? So I think as coaches, we need to be willing to put our egos aside, quite frankly, and lose some games and be okay with that, for the good of the kids, if that's the real reason that we're there coaching.
Well, especially at the very young ages, right? So
Mhm. That's
obviously,
I'm not saying, at a certain point you're going to have to get cut from a team if you're not
right.
making grade. But at that young age, and social media is great for a lot of things, but it's also tough for a lot of things. And you see, it's quite easy. If I went onto Twitter right now, you see a ton of parents that are like, "Oh, this kid is doing this, and he's 4 years old, and this and that," and they're tagging everybody, and it's cool, right? Because their 4-year-old is a monster. But at the same time, we're comparing our insides to everybody else's outsides, and that's not a healthy thing to do.
No, and you can get really distracted by it, and you see all these,
Mhm.
blessed to get an offer from so and so, and then
Mhm.
that kid ends up at some Division 500 school a few years later because they didn't keep working, and that's fine if you want to do that. It just blows my mind. I think we need to focus more on actually being good instead of people thinking we're good,
Yeah,
which is
and
a different deal.
that gets into the whole mental health crisis, truly, that I think we're in, with kids in team sports. No wonder, right? Because we're sitting here with this comparison game, and it's all about how it looks to other people. And it's not even good or bad. It's just, how do I know that I did my best? I mean, can I intrinsically say that I went out and did my best? I might have been imperfect today, but did I, try to make every play that I knew I was supposed to make? Was I trying to hit my spots? Was I trying, was I practicing the things that I've worked on in measurable ways? Do I measure myself beyond just what was my batting average today? Do I have other metrics that I'm looking at? And I think that is what's missing. And that's what I try to do in lessons and in practices. Like, what are the other metrics besides wins and losses and home runs? And, you're enough beyond that 4.9 GPA or whatever everybody has now that doesn't exist. And so, I mean, it's easy, these higher than 4.0 GPAs. And like, how would anybody feel applying for schools and talking to coaches and everything? It's like applying for a job now. You're up against the other 7 billion people in the world. So on the one hand, it's comforting to know that we're not unique. And I think, if we can send that message a little bit more, you're part of a community, you're part of this baseball and softball community of kids. And like, let's build each other up. I mean, not insincerely, but let's build each other up and try to make ourselves the best that we can be, versus trying to compete against all of that when it's impossible. I mean, how could we not be mentally ill as a society, right?
Well, you can't compete against things you don't know, right?
Right.
So you can only compete against yourself, and everybody's race. I'll use baseball as an example. I mean, if the end of the race is the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, right? If that's the end, right? Well, then what's the beginning? Like, if you've never played before, if you've played your whole life, if you're a huge 12-year-old, like, where do you start on that pathway, on that continuum? Not everyone's starting point is the same. Even if we agree that everyone's finish point's the same, but some people's finish point is, man, I just really want to play middle school so I can ride on the bus and go out to dinner with my friends after the game, and even if I don't get to play. And that's okay too. And I think that's what a lot of people, on Twitter and social media don't really understand about what you and I do, is that, yes, we absolutely work with some young men and women and young boys and girls that are elite. And we also work with some kids who this is just another activity for them. They kind of enjoy it. They like seeing you. They like talking to me or my guys or Pinkman or whatever. And it's just something they like. Not everybody has to be a pianist on at Juilliard to want to take piano lessons. Not everybody has to want to play in the big leagues or play at Oklahoma or Duke or wherever, if they're softball players, to take hitting lessons or pitching lessons. Maybe they just like you. Maybe they just like me. Maybe it's just they want to push themselves in a little bit different way. Maybe it gives them confidence, right?
Yep.
And that's what I wish more people understood on Twitter. If they see maybe a drill that looks a little bit odd, or a theory that looks a little bit different, or something that maybe they haven't heard before, it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It might be wrong for you or your hitter, but it might be great for mine or yours. So, I just wish more people understood that. Now, again, you mentioned,
to be careful about right and wrong too. A lot of times, in my opinion, when we get into that as coaches, and we start speaking in absolutes, I think we dig ourselves a hole. That becomes more of a fear thing than it is I'm scared that what I know is no longer relevant. And therefore I'm gonna rely
Jeff
on
Fry. Jeff Fry. Oh, sorry. Jeff Fry. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. Excuse me. Sorry.
And I see it a lot. And I hear it a lot. And so it can become, that's the culture that I try to avoid as a coach. I would rather go in, and I do it all the time. I with the high school practices already and the tryouts and things. I mean, I am all over the University of Wisconsin coach, Badgers coach, puts up a ton of her drills, and she has some great outfielding drills that I've stolen from her. Nothing, we cannot claim that anything we have is unique. Yet again, everything that we feel like we've come up with, someone else has come up with at some point. But anyway, I look at coaches, I look at people who run practices well, the way that I want to run them as a coach, and then I try to take pieces and incorporate that in ways I think will connect with the girls or with the boys, in the cages. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, but we just have to test it. And if you're open with the kids and say, hey, we're going to try something today, then they get to see you be vulnerable. They get, and that gives them permission to be vulnerable. And when they have permission to be vulnerable, that's when they're in a position to learn. So my job, and I say it all the time, my job and your job is really, it's a limited amount about teaching kids baseball and softball, and a lot about like helping the light come on for them for whatever it's going to be. And so if they become willing to be vulnerable and take chances in different areas and kind of figure out who they are, then I've done my job. And that's,
Yeah, I actually totally agree with that. I will say though, that people are paying you and me when they come to lessons, honestly, for us to be right.
Mm-hmm.
They're assuming that we're experts, right? Mm-hmm. Because we have the positions we have, and relative to most people, I would say that we are. So that doesn't mean we're always right. That doesn't mean we get everything right every time. That doesn't mean we don't have good lessons and bad lessons, right? Mm-hmm. That being said, how do you balance the idea of being a lifelong learner and open-minded to everything, which believe it or not, I actually seek out people that think different than I do so I can find mm-hmm. out if I'm right or wrong, or if I need to change things, regardless of what my Twitter feed looks like. You have to be open-minded enough, but you also have to have the filter and the confidence to give definitive answers to your players that are paying you and the parents that are paying you, actually, because they're not trying to pay you $60 to guess.
Right.
They want Johnny to hit.
Yeah. And that's why I feel incredibly blessed to be alive in a time when we have things like hit tracks, and we have things like Synaptic to do vision training, and we have things like the Rebels rack to work on the turn, which we know works because I can tell you now the data that has always existed, but we have only recently begun to be able to measure about why Gehrig and Aaron and Willie Mays hit the way that they hit, right? So now we can measure that. And so that's the great thing. One of the things that I love about working at the Academy is that, it's just, what is the saying? It's like you do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And it's one of those, those things when we always have the new technologies. We are always, Jeff is very active, and Pat and John Pinkman with ABCA and getting out there and seeing, okay, what are the trends, right? But, we coach rotational hitting and have for quite a while. And that hasn't always been a popular concept, right? But it works, and it works for most, pretty much every kid that's come in for us, or at least the kids that come back. So it's working for all of them, and that's doing pretty well. So it's just something that once we're able to measure, and the more data points that we can have, and then being not only the data points that we have in the cage, but then when that's validated, when the kid goes out on the field, or the first lesson, I always love it when they come in and do hit tracks, and I'll look over and say, hey, Dad, is this what, or Mom, is this what you usually see on the field? That they're going up first baseline every time, or whatever, grounders up the first baseline. And they're like, yeah, that's exactly what happens. So it's validating for them to be able to see it. And then when we can pull it up and talk to that information and say, here's what every number on this screen means. It's not that we're going to look at every single number, every at bat, because you'll drive yourself nuts. But it tells a story, right? And we teach kids how to read that story. And then they start, once that's where that light coming on starts to happen, because this is my pattern, right? This is my pattern. This is my pattern when I'm tired. This is my pattern. We've got kids, every time I have a BLT, I come in and I set a record, right? It's those type of things, but these are my patterns, and they act based on data and based on fact, which is what we're able to give them. And I think the differentiating factor then is being able to apply that data to the kid, understanding who that kid is as a person, what's gonna make them tick. Are they super competitive? Are they, really quiet? Or, what kind of a kid are they? And then tailoring the lessons there. And I think that's where we really set ourselves apart.
I think that's the most enjoyable thing about my job is when I get a kid and I've never worked with them before, and we're 10 minutes into their eval or five even, and I asked the mom and I'm like, hey, he never gets in trouble at school, does he? He's super
Right. I know
quiet.
you
He
can
gets
tell birth
great
order,
grades.
you can tell
Yeah,
everything.
like he gets great grades. He'd rather not make a mistake than go for a great
Mhm.
play. He avoids problems and errors. And the moms are like, how do you know
Yep.
that? It's like, because I
It's
talked to your kid
so
for
yeah.
like 35 seconds. Like that's
Yep.
how. And so, but that frames how we teach them. And that's
Mhm.
and that's what I hope people understand when they hear people like you and I talk, where we really do spend that much time in the cage and we really do engage that much with young people, to where from a personality standpoint it's very very obvious and very very easy, if you take the time to really get to know somebody, how you
Mhm.
can help them the fastest way possible. And that's something that from your Twitter feed I've really enjoyed, because you're open minded, but you're not empty minded, meaning
Right.
everything comes in and it's good, you know? And you
You have to
clearly
have your
aren't that way.
filter a little bit. And I think, again, to your point earlier, people do things for the way they look sometimes on social media. And I talk to the girls about it in particular because we go to the weight room and, and we've started programs and it can be very tempting to look and go, oh, well, that girl's lifting, 405 pounds. I'm like, yeah, but her form sucks, or like, this is not sustainable. And that's a one-time lift. And there's so many different factors and she's twice your size and this and that. And we're going for functional first, and then we've got to work up to that. I'd much rather you can get there, but we've got to get there the right way, or else none of this matters. To your point, where are you in? What's your goal? Where's your starting point? And then let's figure out the diagnosis. I kind of always tell the kids when they come in for lessons, before I start writing prescriptions, I got to see who you are, right? I got to see what your issues are. I can't just come in and tell you necessarily specific drills to do. So there are things there that are common throughout the lessons, but there's no one lesson fits every kid. There just isn't. And, that's what 700, 1,000 plus hours in a cage every year will teach you. And that's why people pay us to do what we do.
Well, you got to pay the cost to be the boss, and sometimes that's time, sometimes that's
Mhm.
certification, sometimes that's field time, sometimes it's cage time, right? Like I will honestly tell you, if I coached one of our travel teams, I don't think I'd be very good at it. Uh, I don't have the patience. I don't know what the heck I'd tell a pitcher, that I don't have the patience to coach defense. Like I just don't. And I love the hitting side that I do, and I love communicating with the coaches that allow me to communicate with them. And as I watch players succeed on the field, and I know you feel the same way, getting them to come back and talk to you about, hey, I hit my first home run, or
Mhm.
I finally felt confident, or that mom that pulls you aside, or that dad that pulls you aside, he's like, he's a different kid. Like
Mhm.
he's so much more confident on the field, but like he's also like doing more at home, and his grades
Mhm.
are getting better, and he's speaking to adults better. Like I said, I got two little boys, 8 and 5, and if they ever met you and they didn't look you in the eye and shake your hand
Mhm.
and introduce themselves, we're going to have a problem, me and
Mhm.
them, because that's not how they've been taught. And that doesn't mean that they're not allowed to be shy sometimes, or they're not allowed to do certain things. They are, but you can't have this impending fear of failure and this doubt in how you play or how you even look at your life. And I think that's something that we can give kids in our profession that a lot of people just don't really realize is even part of the job until
Mhm.
they've done it for a while.
Yeah, chase failure. Honestly, chase failure. I always tell the girls, like, this is a softball and life metaphor, right? Charge the hard grounder, because you get that on the first bounce and you're in control, right? You go after the thing that scares you, and you've taken the first step as opposed to being caught on your heels. And absolutely, and when the kids come in for lessons, boys and girls, I talk to them. I say, hey, why are you here? And I tell them, I work for you. I don't actually work for your mom. She might be paying for the lesson, but like I work for you. I'm here to make you better. I assume you weren't just, some of them are just dropped off there. I had one kid once tell me, well, my dad forced me to come. And I'm like, great, the good start, but in general, they have some idea. And sometimes they might pause. Most of the time they look up at mom and dad and then, but it's giving them permission sometimes for the first time, to speak up. And it's not to say that the parents don't give them permission to do that. I think it's just the perception, right? And so when I come in and address them with respect and talk to them like I would talk to another adult, sometimes kids are like, what? But then they start to respond, and it's so cool to what you said, to get those texts or to have the kids reach out. I had a boy, and it was a really bad week for me. My dad had some health problems, and I'm sitting here at the house just on the deck, like totally down. And I had a dad say, hey, he wants to FaceTime you. He just hit a triple. And so the kid, and he did, and he FaceTimed me, and he said, I just wanted to say thank you because, we really worked on this at my lesson, and my swing was totally different, and I just hit a triple, and I really wanted to call you, and like, what a gift. You talk about, how do I balance this? I don't balance this at all. I am tapped out, but like, the reason that I do it is for stuff like that. The reason that I'm able to continue in these periods where it's in season and it's kind of a sprint is because of stuff like that, because nothing else is as fulfilling as that.
Yeah, I mean, it fills your cup, and that's the thing. I mean, the last couple of years, I don't know how it was at Pinkman, but it was really touch and go at BR for a while, believe it or not. And what people don't really realize is when, businesses like mine, when they shut us down and we're not allowed to work, and people think, oh, well, they sell Rebels racks or they sell this, they're fine. Yeah, when business is good, we're fine, but like, we're doing hundreds of thousands of dollars of lessons every year, and when we're shut down for 3 months, 2 months, or however long it was, like, you can't ever get that time back. And so we really struggled for the last couple of years. Recently, actually, just sold my building. We're actually moving very, very soon.
I heard you say that.
To a different spot. I'm excited about it, but the thing is, like, I didn't want to sell the building, right? Like, I had to. We didn't have a choice. So it's kind of one of those things where, the perception of success on Twitter or online or whatever, it can be something different than it actually is. And when you really put the amount of money back into a business, like I know Pinkman does, like I know I do, all that perceived profit, man, it's in my cages, man. That's new baseballs, it's hit tracks, it's spin ball machines, it's K-Vest, it's all these different things to try to keep pushing ourselves to get better and give back to the game. Last question I'm going to ask you. As a female instructor, I'm sure you get the occasional dad side-eyeing you when he's teaching his son, right? How do you overcome that? How do you deal with it? Why do you think that happens? Because I teach female athletes with no problem. Why is that different for you?
I mean, it goes back, it always goes back to just not even generation, just societal. It's a societal issue. I mean, this is just what we've all been taught. Growing up is normal or abnormal. The funny thing is, and again, I don't work for dad. I work for the kid. And when the kids come in, what I notice is when the boys come in, and especially when they're like younger, they really don't even, most of them don't even register it, right? There's a couple, but usually that's coming from home. But most of them don't even register it. It's a grown-up telling you what to do and you do it, right? And then and sometimes they have questions along the way. Usually the youngest child just wants to chat, right? Like, and they come in and just want to have a conversation. But so the younger kids don't. I would say the older ones, because I work with a fair number of high school boys as well on their hitting, and sometimes that first lesson, because I also my name is Jordan, right? And so sometimes people will schedule a lesson, quite frankly, and show up and expect me to
and say, "Where's Jordan?"
Right. And so I know when that happens, because they say, "Hi, we're here for Jordan," and I say, "Hi, that's me," and there's like a little moment, and then we move on. But the fact of the matter is, I don't need to prove my knowledge, right? Like, it's more of, is the kid and is the family comfortable with it? If I'm confident in myself as a coach, just like the confidence that you and I were talking about that we're trying to instill in the athletes, if I'm confident in my coaching abilities and I'm in this role where I'm being paid for my coaching abilities, then it's up to the family to figure out if they have an issue with that or not. And that's their problem, right? If they have an issue with that, that I'm going to offer their kid, then frankly, that's their problem.
I would lose my mind if somebody had an issue with something like that in my
The kids
facility.
usually don't. There are always little things, right? Like there are always, I could give you a million examples of just things that come up that wouldn't come up with male instructors, right? Like I've had, I could go on, but I won't. The fact of the matter is just that's not really my business if they have an issue with it, because they aren't obligated to take a lesson with me. But I would say I do, especially during COVID. Softball went way down, like softball business went way down. And I ended up doing probably about 80-20 baseball for most of the time that we were in, right out of lockdown. And then for probably that following year, honestly. And now I'm probably about 60-40 or 50-50. So I work with a lot of guys, and I haven't had any complaints from the ones that keep coming back, right? Like they keep they keep improving. Their parents are sending me all their home run videos. I love it. I'm stoked for them. So it's sometimes a little bit of a different approach, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's not my business, right? If they got an issue, we've got 5 male coaches that they can work with if they'd rather somebody else.
God, it's so disappointing you have to deal with that. I hate that for you.
It's not everybody. We have fantastic families. It just here and there, there's definitely a look or whatever. But baseball's been my sport for years, baseball and softball. I'm passionate about it. I love it. I love working with the kids. So that's not going to change based on somebody else's perception.
Sure. So I actually work with mostly softball players now. I really have no idea how that happened. I work with a big league or two, a couple minor league guys. And then honestly, like, I don't think I work with any high school boys anymore. It's all softball players. I have no idea how this happened. I really love it though. I mean, they care. They're trying to be great at something. I don't have any softball girls I work with where it's just another activity they do. They're trying to play in college. They care. They've taken the next step to like better their body, better their mind. I don't have any softball girls with bad grades. I don't have any softball girls who I worry about the SCT or the ACT with. It's just, it's so refreshing. You can have a conversation with them. It's really nice. They're just so focused, but so positive. So I really enjoy that. And I hope you get the same vibe from the baseball boys and the girls that you get to work with as well. We've heard your dog a few times. Let me see that thing. Where's he?
I've got a mini beagle who's giving me side eye from the couch, but then I've got Mickey, the 14-year-old demon.
Look at this little guy.
He's the one who's he really likes to be on Zoom calls. So
that's great. Well, here he is.
That in COVID, so he likes.
Well, I don't have any of my dogs or any of my kids up here. I got a Ryan Mountcastle card. You want to see that? It's kind of cool. I don't know. That's a cool one. But look, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much. I really, really enjoyed it. Is there any one last thing you want to tell somebody about yourself or Pinkman Academy or just your journey or anything you want to leave us with?
I think that the one thing, because I've had a player or two text me while we've been on here who are watching. So the one thing I want to say is that if you can visualize something for yourself, and whether that's baseball or softball related or not, but if you can visualize yourself being great at something, like that's already in you. So if you are looking for permission, I'm giving it to you, right? Like go suck at something until you don't suck so much, right? And go just throw yourself into something because you love it and see where that takes you. I always tell the kids to do the next right thing, and that usually takes you on the right path. So
I 100% agree.
But
I 100% agree. And if you're texting your coach that you're watching and you're not retweeting, liking, reposting, then you're not a part of the solution. You're a part of the problem. So let's get that going. Jordan, I really, really appreciate you being on. Shameless plug for retweets, shares, likes.
Man.
I really, really appreciate you being on. I absolutely loved having you. You will be on again. And, when we get off here, I can't wait to hear what you thought of how I did, because it's funny. I always ask my guests, you know what, we'll do it live. I always ask my guests, I say, what could I have done better? We ask our kids every single day to be a little uncomfortable, to
Mm-hmm.
try to do something a little bit more difficult. And that's part of why I do the show live, because I want to do this and be raw and vulnerable here so people can see if I misspeak or if I make a mistake or if I have a bad guest who's super boring, right? Like that's a mistake too. That's on me. So what would you say you wish I asked you, or what could I have done better as a host to help you get your points across better?
Oh man. I feel like we covered the gamut. I'm not gonna say a great job. I know you're not looking for that, right? But I feel like we covered the gamut. Honestly, you didn't ask me to plug the Rebels Rack once, but I will. I will plug it. It has helped our kids immensely. Most of us, or several of us, are rack certified, so I will do the shameless plug for the VR Rebels Rack for sure for hitting. But yeah, I mean, I think just the thing I will say again, the reason that I like being at the academy, and I just want to belabor it because it came up, but you didn't ask about it too much, is just like we don't stagnate, right? We do things the way that we do them until we know a better way, and
Yeah.
we're constantly looking for better ways. And so, today that's hit tracks. Maybe there's something else. There's hit tracks again. There's synaptic. There's just a ton of things that we use on a daily basis that we're always trying to learn about. And we try to live what I always tell the kids, which is come into lessons and suck. Come into lessons and just be terrible, because this is where you find out who you are. And that's what we try to do as coaches. Let's find out who we are. Let's find out what we know and don't know. And that's scary territory to live in. But
Well, you can't live your life in fear. You gotta move forward. You gotta
but you got to move,
keep going.
right?
You
Yeah.
gotta keep going. I mean, you
Fear
can
is
be
not a reason.
afraid, but you can't stop.
Yep.
And that's how business was for me. I'm sure it's how it was for Jeff and the rest of the guys over at Pinkman. I mean, for a while, it was really touch and go for a lot of businesses like ours and a lot of businesses all over the country. So, if there's one thing I've learned in the last 2 years, is that you can feel like you're in a great spot and the next thing you know, you're not. And you got to find a way to overcome that situation, because there's people that rely on you, maybe not just your dogs or my family and my boys, my wife, but like there's 9 or 10 guys whose wives, girlfriends, kids like depend on Baseball Rebellion for their livelihoods. And that's a lot of pressure, but the reality is I wouldn't have it any other way, because I love what we do. And I know you do the same, and we're going to keep making players better. So Jordan, I really appreciate you being on. Thank you again for saying the nice things about the rack. And you're exactly right. I mean, if I could find a better way to do it without the rack, I'd throw the rack in the trash tomorrow, and I'd come up with something else. And that's the reality of the situation. If there was a faster way, that's what I would do. And that's what we would do at BR. And I know that's what you would do at Pinkman. But thus far, we haven't found it. So we're going to keep working at it. I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk very, very soon. Thanks again.
Yeah. Talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.